Good evening, and welcome to SUAANGAN. I'm Lawrence Rogers. I recently had a talk with Nellie Cournoyea, the Chief Executive Officer of the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation. In that interview, she talks about the past, the present, and the future of the corporation. We're glad that you could join us tonight, and we hope you enjoy the program.
My name is Nellie Cournoyea, and presently my job here is the Chair and the Chief Executive Officer of the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation. And this is the overall corporation and all the other corporations such as the Development Corporation, the Investment Corporation, and any of the other subsidiaries are contained under the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation head. So the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation heads up all the corporate groups that are Inuvialuit.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, where you were born, where you were raised up, where you got your education, a little background there?
My home really is Aklavik, and most of my younger life I was brought up about 30 miles below Aklavik, and grew up in that area between Aklavik and the West Channel. So that's what it was called. And in those days everybody was a hunter and a trapper, so my father was a hunter and trapper, and we were just part of a broader community, so everybody did the same thing. So and that's where I spent most of my life. I was fortunate, maybe being a girl and second in a family, and where it was felt I was needed more at home, so I had more of an opportunity to do my education and take my education through correspondence courses rather than going to a hostel. And that helped a lot in terms of, having really strong ties to the family and to the region.
Okay, now tell me a little bit about how COPE got started.
Well, if you might be a little young for this, but in the early 60s, there was a chain of events where more people began to move in. This Inuvik was becoming a larger center where other people's interest seemed to be taken over from what was known as the community of the Delta. And that was lived with for a while, but when the oil and gas industry came in, it sort of shot out into the Delta because most of the work was being done out there. And I'd been working, most of my life with Hunters and Trappers committees and community committees as secretary of letter writing and these types of things. And it got to a point where it was very difficult to get the respect of the industry and of government when people had something to say. And because I guess we were not a political force to be reckoned with, and because Agnes Summer was a key person, she generally led the way and tried to figure out things, what is the best way to go, how do the people get a voice. And so with her connections and with her discussions, she felt that you had to become a legitimate incorporated body with a mandate, with the guidelines and the membership behind you. So that's how COPE was formed, because people just were not taking the Inuvialuit or even the Gwich'in who were around here very seriously.
You already mentioned the mandate. What was the mandate of COPE in those days?
Well, it was basically to represent a broad base of people who had their membership in. At the beginning, because there were no other organizations in the Northwest Territories, we had, the COPE had membership from Iqaluit to Pelly Bay to to Ray Edzo, and subsequently the treaty groups came together and they wanted to restrict their membership to treaty only, so those groups ended up dropping away and forming their own organization. And then Inuit Deperkset of Canada decided that it was too broad an area, so they formed a broader organization known as Inuit Deperkset of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So these things, you know, happen. We started with everybody involved, and then gradually, I guess there was funding available to the other organization. It was very difficult for Agnes to secure support, government funding, lobby support for COPE.
Mm-hmm.
And because at the beginning she didn't want that. She felt that people had to be committed to the organization, had to really believe in what they were doing, or else it wouldn't survive.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first really clash or conflict we had with oil and gas was within Banks Island, and some of the work that was done at Crossley Lake, where there was dynamite blasting in the lakes. People were very concerned about that, and so those were in the early stages of the organization, right at the beginning of 1970. And it was difficult to hold things together because there was always, people weren't experienced in an adversarial organization.
Mm-hmm.
You know, most Inuvialuit like to be nice about things, and it was difficult for them to get aggressive, and it was nice that Agnes was around because she didn't have a problem with that, you know, and many of us were recruited to do the background work, and she didn't have any fear of facing some pretty tough and well funded
Mm-hmm.
industry organizations, and even some of the councils, you know, the community councils like the town of Inuvik was very concerned that we would drive away the industry and that you know, nothing, you know, will happen. And so we didn't have a lot of friends, you know, as COPE, you know, other than the really strong Inuvialuit that were backing it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're looking more in the future.
Mm-hmm.
You are watching Television Northern Canada.
How you got involved with the government, and what were your thoughts, if any, what was going on with IRC in its infancy?
Well, I was involved with COPE and then ITC, and then when we broke away in 1974, I was involved with COPE and the negotiation of the claim. I was heavily involved with the community part of it, the communications in the community, dealing with the community, deal with individual families,
Mm-hmm.
information, and community support. So I was always involved with that, you know, when we went on with our claim.
Mm-hmm.
So in we had a lot of problems. We had the government of the Yukon was against us because they didn't want us to have any part of a claim in the Yukon. The Indian groups in the Northwest Territories were concerned with what we were doing because they didn't want us to set a precedent.
Mm-hmm.
And even with Inuit Deperkset, we had difficulty with them, you know, with a number of people who felt that, you know, when they withdrew the claim, because we were all together at one time, all the Inuit were together, but they weren't prepared because the communities weren't enough informed. But we were facing the development, we were facing the you know major upheaval here, and if you left it too long, then, you know, just by not doing anything about it, you don't have a place, eh?
Mm-hmm.
And people were pushed further back in the background. So I was always involved with it, you know, right from the beginning, and the concern of having Inuvialuit, you know, have a say in their land base and in their homeland. And when I was working with COPE, and we always had difficulty with the Northwest Territorial Government. They weren't hard and fast on anything, but what it was is they were always throwing roadblocks in, you know, creating issues that we had to solve. And it took a long time. It slowed down the process of claims. And although they weren't part of the negotiations, they were part of the federal government team. And so they'd always throw roadblocks in the way. And it was decided that someone had to be in the territorial government that understood the claim and to make sure that the issue of the Northwest Territories government was taken care of. So that's why I ran in the election in 1979. It's just for that specific purpose, because we seemed to be stymied by the NWT government. We couldn't understand why. It just seemed that there was a group of people that didn't want the claim to go forward, so let's keep putting stumbling blocks and just delay and delay, and maybe they'll get tired and give up, or run out of money, or their own people will turn against them because then they're spending too much money. So all these kinds of things were happening, so that's why I didn't really have a great desire to run for territorial council. It was the fact that there was a number of us who could have, and so we sat together, and because my children had grown up and were on their own, I was the one that probably had the best ability to, and the freedom to take on that task.
Mm-hmm. To work, IRC, you said right in the beginning, was the sort of like the mother company.
Well, in the land claims,
Mm-hmm.
okay, when we were negotiating a claim, we had to have an overall body to be responsible
Like
for the
heads of all
total.
the other departments.
Yeah, they're like the IDC. They operate somewhat independently.
Mm-hmm.
The Game Council operates somewhat independent. They operate independently, and they have their boards. But overall, the IRC is responsible, you know, for the well-being of those corporate groups,
Mm-hmm.
to see that they reflect the needs of their beneficiaries.
Okay. When did you say to yourself, I've had enough of the government, I want to get back to where I grew up, the area that I grew up? what prompted you to run for the chair of IRC?
Well, I guess it really wasn't whether you gave up on the government or anything, because no matter what we do in this land...
I mean, you worked at it long enough.
Yeah. No, it wasn't that. You see, I didn't decide I worked at it long enough. It wasn't that at all. What it was is that over a number of years, a lot of the people who had been involved with the negotiation of the claim were very concerned about the direction that the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation and some of its subsidiaries were going. There was a great deal of concern that the beneficiaries' interests were not well served, and that there was the monetary or the trust or the heritage fund was put in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a lot of lobbying to me to come back and get re-involved with the organization. And a lot of people felt that, a lot of our beneficiaries felt that even though I had gone through the government for the specific reason of trying to make a better place or protect some of the interests of Inuvialuit, I should come back and do the same thing where it was most needed at that time, because there was a lot of dissension and problems arising from certain directions that were taken, and a lot of concerns raised by Inuvialuit beneficiaries. So I was asked by and solicited by many beneficiaries to come and once again take over the chair of the IRC, mainly to try to stabilize it and put things back in order.
Mm-hmm. During your years as working in different levels of government, how did this ready you for what you're doing now here at IRC?
Well, I guess the readiness, if you want to know, or the learning or the knowledge came way back before government. You know, I've always, from the time I was a kid, always involved with community activities and always involved with people and the different organizations that were formed, whether they were community or otherwise. And I've always been interested in, you know, how things work generally. You know, we're not just a little, you know, my father was very good about this and talking to everybody in the West Channel. I know Victor Allen and Edward and all these sometimes used to listen to him and say, what are you talking about? Because we always thought that everything should stay the same. We'll still be standing here in the bank. We'll still be picking off muskrats. You know, we'll still be skinning muskrats. And the economy could still survive and we'll still have a good life. But he used to always talk about us not, you know, putting our head in the ground and thinking that we're only going to be ourselves. And, you know, but just through the discussions and pushing, you know, ourselves to think beyond and saying that we're just a small part of a very large society. So even though you ran your life perfectly where you are, you did the best, the influence from other places are going to slowly overtake you, and you have to be ready for that. And you can't put your head in the sand anymore. And we used to wonder, what is he talking about, you know? But as things evolved, you could see these changes coming in. Then you could see at one time you were a very important group of people. And then all of a sudden someone else is more important. And someone else, later on, you're just a nuisance, you know? So I guess I've always been involved. So whether I was involved with COPE or IRC and government, you learn a lot. In government, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about, you know, how to do things, how to get things done, you know, where the connections are in government, who does what, you know, and how governments change, you know, and the limitations on government too. So that knowledge is always good, whether I was working here or working in a community, that knowledge is very good.
From Inuvik, you're watching Television Northern Canada, and we're all proud to be here. Thank you.
What is the mandate now of the IRC?
Well, the mandate of IRC is contained in the final agreement, and one of the main parts of it is to allow Inuvialuit to be meaningful participants in a changing Northern and Canadian society. That means a lot. You know, we have to get politically or otherwise avenues for every Inuvialuit to try to be a meaningful partner or participant in the society. You know, right now, when we're discussing that issue, we ask ourselves this question: what is basically the problem that is limiting that to happen? Okay? What is limiting it? And some of the problems is economics, jobs, and when you talk about that, it's lack of education. Comes out more and more, the lack of academic education. People have different kinds of education, but academic education is very important in this day and age. You know, even if you're a trapper, it would be important for you to have a fairly decent academic education, just because of how you would do your work differently. And people having children, if they wanted to educate their children out, if they decide to have a land base, you want to educate your children. It's possible to educate your children on the land. So all these things lead up to what is it that the IRC should be focusing on. And we've been struggling with that for the last year now since I came. I said, we've got to have a strategy on where we're going as an organization. So we've picked at, you know, meetings, picked at communities, picked at individuals, said, okay, where is the biggest hole? What is going to allow us to, you know, take our place, you know, effectively in society? And they said to get the education levels up, you know, get people to function, be able to function in a competitive basis. What you choose to do in the end, it's not a problem, you know. But, you know, to try to take from the past, you know, the good things from the past, where when people were laid to the land and had to survive, you had to be disciplined. You know, so you give up or give up what you really want to do that. Take the people to accept and emulate or to take it part of their and still do the new things, because and it's good choices, ability to tough things up to you want, and you need to do have those in the past. That's right. Because if you didn't have those in the past, you died. You're graduating classes whether you lived or died. Today you don't really die, you know. But if you don't survive and you don't get on with your life and you don't feel good about yourself and you don't feel that you're competitive with other people, you don't feel so good about yourself. So that's a different way of dying. So we have to get on in trying to, you know, work with the education department, with government and everyone, trying to get people academically operational so that they don't feel that they can't compete if they want to compete. So our mandate it changes. Like, I mean, you know, we still say we want Inuvialuit to be fully participants and healthy in this day and age, okay? How you do that will change over time. And the way the final agreement is written, it is a changing document. It's a working document that you just don't do it one way. There's different ways of doing it. So we're putting a strategy together to put our forces behind getting the job of getting people on their feet and getting them involved and feeling good about themselves.
I guess you touched on this a little bit already, but a corporate plan is in the works throughout the IRC. Has that been done in the past, or is this something that
no, there was no.
You started something?
Well, I believe it was started and stopped and started and stopped, but there was no real corporate plan. So we feel that it's very, very necessary to have that, because we're handling, heritage money for Inuvialuit, and we have to operate with we're a large corporation. We're not a huge corporation, but we're large. And so you have to have a corporate plan to know where we're going and what the rules and procedures are to govern ourselves.
Can you elaborate on the plan a bit?
Well, part of the corporate plan is to set up who does what. Okay, who's responsible for what? And then that gives you your accountability. And how we're going to manage, what is our responsibility for managing the Heritage Fund of Inuvialuit? What is going to be our dividend policy? For example, we've never had a dividend policy, for example. And we have to work with IDC and with the Investment Corporation and all these people. But we never had a definite plan to say, what are the guidelines that are going to govern us in looking after and being responsible for these various functions we have to carry out on behalf of the Inuvialuit.
Thanks, Nellie, for taking the time to sit down with us and talk to us about the IRC, as well as our viewers. We're glad that you could join us tonight on our program. Thanks again for watching. Good night.
Well, if we commit ourselves, to doing a good job, what I'd like to see is I'd like us to have a Inuvialuit organization that the Inuvialuit beneficiaries are proud of and they respect. And I would like us to have our Inuvialuit organizations where other people respect us and governments respect us, and we have a reputation of stability, honesty, and hard work. And that